Today, we're talking about a woman who didn't just challenge a broken system, she went right inside of it and rebuilt the whole thing from the ground up. Her name was Jane Addams, and her secret weapon was this incredible high-performance strategy she called radical solidarity. So how'd she do it? Let's take a look.
Okay, I want you to picture this. The year is 1889 in Chicago. The air is just thick with the smell of uncollected garbage, and you can hear the nonstop churn of factory machines. And right there in the middle of all of it stands Jane Addams. Now, she comes from money, she has a fancy education, but in this moment, she has this profound realization. All of her privilege is completely useless unless she uses it to fix the very ground she's standing on. This wasn't about charity. Oh no, this was a decision to weaponize proximity.
So she's at this fork in the road, right? She could have been the outsider, the type, writing checks, talking about the problems from a comfortable, safe distance. That's the traditional path. But Addams, she chose the path of the insider. She dove headfirst into what she called civic inhabitation, because she believed that shared experience wasn't just some nice feel-good idea, it was her most lethal professional weapon. But a conviction like that doesn't just appear out of thin air. It was forged years earlier. To really get why she made that choice, we have to rewind a bit. We need to explore where this conviction came from. A period of her life that was all about struggle, frustration, and what she called the snare of preparation. Before she was this global icon, Jane was a kid in Illinois with a crooked spine, constantly fighting against a world that just wanted her to be a quiet invalid. She was basically an outsider in her own body. But she was also guided by her father's incredibly powerful moral compass, his Lincoln-era ethics. This was a man so honest he wouldn't even accept a discount on a train ticket. From him, she learned that integrity wasn't just an idea. It had a physical weight. It's something you have to actually carry with you every single day. So after college, she just drifted. She entered this period of what she described as soul-crushing aimlessness. For 8 whole years, she was just preparing. The so-called safety of the fancy European Grand Tour, for her, it felt like a prison, suffocating her ability to have an impact. She was drowning in this existential hunger, seeing the brutal poverty in London's East End and realizing that not being useful was like a disease of the soul. And this is the turning point. In 1888, she finally makes a decision. It's like a switch flips. She realizes that if she doesn't act right now, if she doesn't physically settle in the heart of the problem, the identity society had created for her, this cultured lady, was going to completely smother her vision. This was her saying, "I'm done." She consciously refused to be consumed by the snare of preparation. It was a commitment to unlearn the need for social approval and instead to seek total, unvarnished impact. So this was her crossing the threshold moment. No more preparing, no more theorizing from afar. She moves into Chicago's 19th Ward, which was the most dangerous in the entire city, and she founds Hull House. This is where she starts to weaponize proximity. Hull House, this old decaying mansion, it becomes her headquarters. But her goal wasn't charity, it was solidarity. Her mission was to practice what she called sovereign applied democracy, a type of democracy built not on votes, but on lived experience and shared responsibility. And that meant she was willing to stand right there, in her own proximity, to live inside the crisis without some social buffer to protect her. She wasn't there to save people, she was there to be their neighbor. And this led to her core strategy, which we see right here, civic inhabitation. This is a systematic belief, a whole methodology. You fix the world where it's breaking by literally living inside the problem. Your presence, your body, your daily life, that becomes your primary tool for change. This one idea would become the foundation for everything she would go on to build. So how did she actually do it? This wasn't just a philosophy, it was a system. She turned her ideas into a set of tangible, repeatable habits that we can actually call the Addams Method. So here's the crucial thing to understand. Addams treated Hull House not as a charity, but as a laboratory. The entire neighborhood was her field of study. Her goal was to master the fundamental logic of its problems, everything from the politics of garbage inspection to the dynamics of a labor strike. She believed that if she could master the truth on the ground, eventually the world's leaders would have no choice but to align with her frequency. And this breaks down her rigorous daily system. Number 1, live the problem. You inhabit the crisis to force your own moral clarity. 2, the statistical audit. You use data as a sovereign weapon. 3, morning ward walks. She didn't stay cooped up inside. She walked the streets, tracking problems with real technical expertise. And 4, applied empathy. This meant designing programs that were a direct threat to institutional apathy. That was her protocol.
Let's dig into that statistical audit for a second, because it was more than just collecting numbers. It was a weapon. For example, when she saw kids playing among piles of rotting garbage, she didn't just write an angry letter. No, she and the residents of Hull House documented every single sanitation issue. They mapped the direct link between the garbage, the contaminated water, and outbreaks of typhoid and scarlet fever. And when the city ignored their 1,000+ reports, she just took a different route. She bid for and won the contract to be the ward's official garbage inspector. See? That's the Addams Method. Turn data into an argument they can't ignore and then become the solution yourself.
And all of this, all of it, was built on her core philosophy, radical solidarity. And notice the language here. It's a high-performance strategy. It requires you to stay in the neighborhood until the problem, the breaking, is absolutely, totally undeniable. It's a disciplined belief that my well-being is completely tied to yours. The good of the one is tied to the good of the all. Period. This slide really just lays it all out, doesn't it? The traditional philanthropist, they follow a single, often simplistic story. Maybe they're seeking praise, a little social status, but the neighbor, the Addams model, does the exact opposite. They inhabit the crisis. They actively seek the broken place, because that's where the truth lives. This commitment to what she called foundational solidarity, this non-negotiable belief that our lives are all interconnected, that's what made her the gold standard for clarity. So what was the result of all this? Well, the payoff for the Addams Method was a profound transformation, not just for her own life, but of the entire concept of social reform in America. I mean, let's just remember where she started, right? An aimless traveler in Europe, filled with that existential hunger, feeling totally useless and trapped by what her social class expected of her. To this, the architect of a new moral conscience for an entire country. The sheer scale of that journey is just immense. She proved that her strategy, fix the world where it's breaking, is a structural weapon that could make something as simple as a garbage inspection the most important political act of a decade. In 1931, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. But you know what? The prize was never the goal. It was just a symbol, an outcome of her real achievement, creating and perfecting the Addams Method. And this right here is her ultimate legacy. She completely destroyed the myth that democracy is something you do once every few years in a ballot box. She replaced it with a living, breathing democracy, one where the only thing that truly matters is the reality of the unvarnished neighborhood. And this is where her story becomes our story. Look, her journey isn't just a history lesson. It's a manual. It's a guide for turning your own frustration into real action. So let's talk about your 19th ward. Does any of this sound familiar? That feeling of endlessly preparing for a life that just never seems to begin? We're so often told, get one more degree, one more certification, then you can make a real impact. Her story is a direct challenge to that whole line of thinking. It teaches us that real power is tied to your ability to stop observing from a distance and start settling right in the heart of the problem you want to solve. So here's the question for you. What is your 19th ward? What problem, what project, what relationship in your life have you been studying from afar? Maybe it's a career change you've been researching for years, or a community issue you only read about. What would happen if you stopped theorizing and actually committed to proximity? If you decided to inhabit that crisis, to feel its weight and its logic until you found the fix? Because that's the ultimate lesson from Jane Addams. When you raise your level of solidarity, you stop being a victim of your circumstances and you start becoming the master of the outcome. The truth isn't in the theory, it's in the touch. And your presence is the code for your greatness.